Welcome to episode 146 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's March 26, 2005. We're in San Jose, at Saprissa, and today's story is about a World Cup qualifier played in a stadium, but not in front of a crowd. Because on this day in 2005, Costa Rica beat Panama 2-1 in a World Cup qualifier played behind closed doors, a match shaped less by noise than by the absence of it. But how did we get here? To understand why this felt so strange, you have to start with the qualifying landscape itself. This was CONCACAF's final round for the 2006 World Cup, the Hexagonal. That 16 pressure chamber, where every match feels like a national referendum. 10 matches, 5 opponents, little margin for error. The top 3 would go straight to Germany. 4th place would go to an intercontinental playoff. Everyone else would be left with regret. And Costa Rica entered that hex with real pedigree. They had already been to the World Cup, 1990, 2002, and now they wanted a third. They had one of the stronger football identities in Central America, a serious domestic culture, a history of producing technically gifted players, and recent proof that they could compete on the world stage. In 2002, they had pushed Brazil, beaten China, and drawn with Turkey, yet still went home in the group stage, but only on goal difference. Panama came in from a different historical angle. They had never reached a World Cup. They were still building their modern football identity, still trying to push beyond being a difficult regional opponent into becoming a genuine World Cup nation. But they were improving, slowly, then more clearly. They had survived the earlier qualification rounds, reached the Hex for the first time, and were beginning to look like a country that would matter more and more in CONCACAF. So the match on March 26 was already meaningful. But then came February 9. Costa Rica hosted Mexico in San Jose in the opening round of the Hex and lost 2-1. That result itself was significant. Mexico had never before won a World Cup qualifier in Costa Rica, but the larger story was what happened around the result. After the final whistle, home supporters threw objects toward the field and toward match officials and Mexican players. Contemporary reporting described bottles, coins, batteries, and fruit. The image was not of a frustrated crowd merely grumbling at defeat. It was of a crowd crossing into conduct that FIFA could not pretend was normal home pressure anymore. And this was not occurring in some disciplinary vacuum. Closed-door sanctions already existed in football. They were known in club competitions and in some international contexts. In World Cup qualifying too, there had already been a precedent the previous year, when Iran played Qatar behind closed doors in February 2004, after earlier crowd trouble against North Korea in an Asian Cup qualifier. But Costa Rica's case was different in a way that made it unique. This was a World Cup qualifier ordered behind closed doors specifically because of disorder in a previous World Cup qualifier. So the punishment was not abstract. It was directly connected to the same campaign, the same road to Germany, the same competitive ecosystem. And on March 9, FIFA acted. Costa Rica were fined 20,000 Swiss francs and ordered to host Panama behind closed doors at Saprissa. Reporting at the time also noted that Panama supporters would not be admitted either. Costa Rica appealed, but the sanctions stood. That is why this match became so novel in the CONCACAF context. A World Cup qualifier in Central America is supposed to be full of pressure, noise, flags, drums, and the emotional edge that makes the region so distinctive. Saprissa especially was not built in football memory as a quiet place. It was built as a competitive instrument, a home field, a force multiplier. And now FIFA had removed the multiplier. So by the time March 26 arrived, the football had a weird frame around it, a match of real qualification importance, but no public crowd, no home wall of sound, no away section either, just players, staff, security officials, and a kind of echo that makes every shout travel farther than it should. The official FIFA report for the match lists an attendance of 8,000, which likely reflects accredited personnel, security, media, and stadium staff rather than ordinary spectators. It sounds high though, because in practical football terms, and when you watch the match footage, this was a ghost match, an empty stadium World Cup qualifier. And then the game began. And the atmosphere was exactly as strange as you would imagine. Without supporters, the match sounded procedural and exposed. Instructions from the bench cut through the air. Every whistle felt louder. Every appeal felt oddly intimate. The visual grammar of a World Cup qualifier was there. 2 national teams, a World Cup at stake, but the emotional grammar was missing. This was football with a crowd subtracted. Costa Rica still had the stronger squad and the greater expectation, but expectation in silence can feel heavier, not lighter. Just before halftime, they got the break they needed. In the 40th minute, Wayne Wilson scored from the penalty spot. Costa Rica 1, Panama 0. That should have made the evening calmer. Instead, it only made it more tense, because this was not one of those sterile, sleepy behind closed doors matches where nothing happens. It became jagged. Early in the second half, Costa Rica went down to 10 men. Jose Luis Lopez was sent off in the 47th minute after picking up a second yellow card. And now the match tilted. Panama were back in it, not just in the scoreboard, but structurally. One man up, still only one goal down, against a host that could not lean on a crowd. And Panama found the equalizer in the 58th minute. Roberto Brown scored from the penalty spot, 1-1, on penalties as well as on goals. And at that point, the entire evening started to threaten Costa Rica with one of those psychologically damaging home results that are not defeats, but feel close to them. They had already lost to Mexico. They were supposed to restore order against Panama. Instead, in an empty stadium with 10 men, they were being dragged toward a draw. That is what made the finish matter. Into stoppage time, the score was still level. And then, in the 91st minute, Roy Myrie scored. Costa Rica 2, Panama 1. A late winner in a normal qualifier detonates the stadium. This one landed in near vacuum. No roar from the terraces, no great tidal noise, just players celebrating, benches erupting, and the strange sensation of a dramatic football ending stripped of its usual soundtrack. That contrast is the whole point of the story. This was a match with late drama, pressure, a red card, 2 penalties, and a 91st minute winner. And yet, what people remembered most was the emptiness around it. The sense that football had staged a major competitive event inside conditions that felt almost like a training ground, with consequences. So what? In the immediate standings, the win mattered. Costa Rica did qualify for the 2006 World Cup, finishing third in the Hex with 16 points. Panama did not. They finished last, though simply reaching the Hex had been a milestone in their rise. The gap between the two teams still existed in 2005, but it was shrinking. And in the decade that followed, Panama would keep narrowing until eventually they too reached the World Cup in 2018. And of course, we'll see them again in a few months when they play Ghana, Croatia, and England at the 2026 World Cup. Costa Rica's World Cup itself, though, did not become a triumph. They opened the 2006 tournament in Munich against host nation Germany and lost 4-2 in the highest scoring opening match in World Cup history. Then they lost 3-0 to Ecuador and 2-1 to Poland. 3 matches, 3 defeats, bottom of the group. So the ghost match helped them get to Germany, but it did not signal a great campaign once they arrived. As for the disciplinary side, the closed-door sanction and fine were the main immediate punishments tied to the Mexico incident. The purpose was both punitive and symbolic. Punish the federation, remove the crowd as an instrument, and send a message that World Cup qualifiers were not exempt from serious stadium order sanctions. That matters in the longer history of closed-door football. And in the decades since, empty stadium sanctions have become more familiar in UEFA competitions, in domestic leagues, and in later FIFA qualifying cases too. But in 2005, this still felt unusual enough to be its own story, especially in a World Cup qualifying match in this part of the world. It was a reminder that the crowd is not just scenery, it is part of the competitive equation, and when football removes it, the game changes shape. And there's an irony worth keeping. Costa Rica were punished because the supporters had tried to weaponize the home environment against Mexico. Then they had to play Panama without that environment at all. And still, they scraped the points they needed, but only just, with 10 men, with 1 late goal, and with no noise to carry them. That makes March 26, 2005 more than a novelty. It becomes a case study in what happens when football strips a qualifier down to its hard components. 2 teams, 1 referee, 1 stadium, no audience, and nowhere for atmosphere to hide. Before we go, 3 things to take away from March 26, 2005. First, this was one of the earliest and most striking closed-door World Cup qualifiers of the modern era, and the first that was imposed because of disorder in a previous qualifier from the same campaign. Second, the match itself was anything but dull. A Costa Rica penalty before halftime, a red card just after the break, Panama's equalizer from the spot, and Roy Myrie's 91st minute winner. And third, the sanction underlined something larger. In World Cup qualifying, crowd behavior is not background noise. It can alter the ecosystem so much that FIFA is willing to empty the stadium and make the absence of fans the defining fact of the match. On this day in 2005, Costa Rica beat Panama 2-1 in a World Cup qualifier played behind closed doors after crowd disorder against Mexico. A ghost match in San Jose that showed how much of football's force comes not only from the players on the pitch, but from the people kept outside. That's all for episode 146 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Lost Guy. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a 5-star rating, and share it with all your friends. Tomorrow, we head back to South America, to March 27, 1955, and the most unlikely of hat-tricks, when Angel Labruna found a way to score 3 in a story that still feels improbable 70 years later. See you tomorrow.